more story videos. There was a comment to make a story about Circe, one of the stories in the Greek mythology, and I thought, why not? Let's make a whole video about it. So I have a couple. No, I have more than a couple. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stories for you guys. So I wouldn't take this particularly scary. Maybe some a bit frightening and eerie, but mostly very captivating, and I would even say very moving stories, and some strange and eerie. So yeah, so let's get started with the video, okay? So we have story number 1 is Circe. Circe is one of Greek mythology's most captivating and multifaceted characters, known as a powerful enchantress and often considered one of the earliest depictions of a witch in Western literature. Her story is both enchanting and complex, woven with themes of magic, transformation, isolation, and resilience. Circe's mythology places her in a unique position as both a divine and a solitary figure. She is the daughter of Helios, the god of the sun, and Perse, a nymph of the ocean, which gives her a deep connection to both the celestial and natural worlds. Unlike other gods and demigods who often occupy themselves with human affairs or dwell on Mount Olympus, Circe lives alone on the island of Aeia. This isolation is part of what defines her. She is powerful and skilled in sorcery, relying on her deep knowledge of herbs, potions, and spells. In many ways, her island is her kingdom, and she rules it with independence, creating an environment that's entirely her own. Wild animals roam the island, and in some interpretations, these animals, which are wolves, lions, and other fearsome creatures, are not just natural beings but are men she has enchanted and transformed. This mastery of transformation is one of her trademarks, symbolizing her control over life and form, a boundary even the gods often respect. Circe's most famous encounter is with Odysseus, the Greek hero of Homer's Odyssey. When Odysseus and his crew land on Aeia, they are immediately drawn into her world. She initially appears as a gracious host, inviting a group of Odysseus's men into her home and offering them food and drink. But her hospitality is a trap. She uses a potion to transform these men into pigs, illustrating not only her magical power, but also her distrust of strangers and her use of enchantments as a form of Circe turning Odysseus's man into animals may be both a defensive move and a symbolic one, representing the animalistic nature she sees in them. Odysseus, however, is not deterred. Determined to save his crew, he prepares to confront Circe. Before entering her home, he is visited by Hermes, the messenger god, who provides him with a magical herb called Molly. This herb protects Odysseus from her spells, allowing him to approach her without falling victim to her enchantments. When Circe attempts to cast her spell on him, she is astonished to find that it failed, marking a turning point in her story. Here, Circe encounters a man who is both immune to her powers and courageous enough to confront her. This act of resistance forces Circe to recognize Odysseus not as a mere intruder but as a worthy individual. Intrigued and impressed by his resistance, Circe seizes hostility and their interaction shifts from one of confrontation to mutual respect and understanding. She not only releases Odysseus's man from their animal forms, returning them to their human state, but also welcomes Odysseus and his crew as guests. Over time, Circe and Odysseus become lovers, and she offers him shelter and companionship. For an entire year, he and his crew stay on her island, a time marked by rest, healing, and for Odysseus a temporary escape from his burdens. Yet Circe is more than a mere detour in Odysseus's journey. She is a key ally who provides him with knowledge crucial for his continued voyage. When the time comes for Odysseus to resume his journey home to Ithaca, Circe does not attempt to keep him, showing a deep understanding of his destiny and priorities. Instead, she offers him guidance on how to safely navigate the challenges he will face, including the dangers of the sirens and the treacherous passage between Scylla and Charybdis. This act underscores Circe's complexity. She is not merely an enchantress, but a wise and compassionate figure who respects Odysseus's purpose and willingly aids him. Over the centuries, Circe's character has evolved in art and literature, becoming a symbol of female independence and strength. Unlike many women in Greek mythology who are confined by their roles, Circe chooses her own path, living independently and mastering skills that make her formidable even among gods. introspective character struggling with her identity, family expectations, and her place in the world. This retelling presents her as a woman shaped by both love and loss, who gradually learns to embrace her power and autonomy. In Miller's story, Circe is more than an obstacle in a hero's journey. She is the hero of her own story, a character whose strength lies not just in her magic, but in her resilience, growth, and self-acceptance. A very captivating story. Okay. Story number 2. The Furies, also known as Erinyes. In the shadowy recesses of ancient Greek mythology, the Furies, or Erinyes, were primal beings of vengeance, justice, and relentless pursuit. They were older than most Olympian gods, born from the blood of Erinyes, the sky god, when his son Cronus violently overthrew him by severing his flesh. This act of cosmic upheaval spilled divine blood upon the earth, giving rise to the Erinyes as embodiment of retribution for crimes so grievous they defied human comprehension. The Furies were 3 sisters. Alecto, the unceasing one, Megara, the grudging one, and Tisiphone, the avenger of murder. Their appearance was enough to strike terror into the hearts of mortals and gods alike. They were often described as haggard with cracked skin that oozed darkness, eyes that burned red with wrath, and snakes slithering and writhing in their hair. Their wings were leathery, akin to bats, and their robes, tattered and dripping with gore, exuded a pungent stench of decay. Their hands wore iron talons, perfect for tearing apart their prey. The Erinyes were not arbitrary in their wrath. They were bound to a sacred duty to punish those who committed heinous acts, particularly crimes that disrupted familial bonds, murders, betrayals, incest, and violations of sacred oath all fell under their purview. These crimes were seen as affronts to both the mortal world and the divine order, and the Furies were relentless in ensuring that no wrongdoer escaped justice. They did not strike their victims down immediately. Instead, they preferred a slow, torturous descent into madness. A guilty soul would hear whispers that seemed to come from nowhere, soft at first, then growing louder like a storm, brewing within their own mind. Shadowy forms of the Erinyes would flicker at the edge of their vision, never fully sanity and the guilt festered into paranoia, fear, and despair. One of the most chilling aspects of the Furies was their unyielding pursuit. They could not be outrun, bribed, or reasoned with. A guilty soul might flee to the farthest corners of the earth or plead for divine intervention, but the Furies always found them. Their punishments extended beyond death. Even in the afterlife, they would drag the soul of their victim to Tartarus, the deepest pit of the underworld, where it would endure eternal torment. The Furies were not malevolent by nature. They represented an ancient form of justice that predated human laws. Their vengeance was not random or cruel. It was rooted in restoring balance to a world disrupted by acts of violence and betrayal. However, their methods were horrifyingly brutal, and their presence a reminder that no crime could be hidden forever. In myth, the Erinyes are most famously invoked in the story of Orestes, the son of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra. I hope I'm getting the pronunciations correct. Yeah. Okay. After Clytemnestra murdered Agamemnon, Orestes was compelled by the god Apollo to avenge his father for killing his mother. This act of matricide, though sanctioned by a god, was still a violation of the sacred bond between mother and child. The Erinyes descended upon Orestes with unrelenting fury, driving him to madness as they pursued him across the earth. His only salvation came through the intervention of Athena, who called for a trial to determine whether Orestes' actions were justified. This trial not only absolved Orestes but also symbolized the shift from primal vengeance to a more structured legal order, as the Furies were transformed into the humanities, benevolent protectors of justice. Despite this transformation, the Erinyes remained a potent symbol of the inevitability of justice and the consequences of one's actions. Their legend endured, warning mortals and gods alike that some sins could never be hidden, and that guilt, no matter how deeply buried, would always find its way to the surface. Okay, I hope you like the two story stuff so far. Let's move on to the third story, the Gorgons, okay, and Medusa, of course. The Gorgons are among the most chilling and iconic figures in Greek mythology, a trio of sisters who embodied terror and monstrous power. This story, and particularly the tale of Medusa, is both a cautionary tale and a deep exploration of transformation, punishment, and vengeance. devoted to the goddess Athena. Her beauty was so striking that it caught the attention of Poseidon, god of the sea. Overcome by desire, Poseidon pursued Medusa into Athena's temple, where he defiled her in an act of violence. Athena, enraged not at Poseidon but at Medusa for allowing the desecration of a sacred space, punished the young priestess. She transformed Medusa into a gorgon. Her radiant hair turned into snakes, and her gaze caused to petrify anyone who looked directly at her. This unjust punishment cast Medusa out of the mortal world, forcing her to seek refuge on a remote island, where she lived in isolation, feared by all who knew of her. Medusa's tragic story takes a darker turn with the hero Perseus, sent on a seemingly impossible quest by King Polydectes. Perseus was tasked with retrieving the head of Medusa, armed with divine gifts, the reflective bronze shield from Athena, a harpy's sword from Hermes, winged sandals, and the helm of invisibility. Perseus set out to confront the dreaded Gorgon. Using the shield to avoid direct eye contact, Perseus approached Medusa as she slept. In a swift and brutal act, he beheaded her, using the harpy's sword to sever her neck. From her blood sprang two extraordinary beings, Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysaor, a giant wielding a golden sword. These were the children of Medusa and Poseidon, a strange and poignant legacy of her cursed existence. Medusa's severed head remained potent even in death. Perseus wielded it as a weapon, turning his enemies to stone with its petrifying gaze. Later he gifted the head to Athena, who placed it upon her shield, the Aegis, as a symbol of protection and power. In this way, Medusa's image continued to inspire both fear and reverence. Her story did not end with her death. Over time, Medusa's tale has been interpreted in many ways as a narrative of victimhood and survival, a symbol of feminine rage and power, and a cautionary reminder of the gods' capriciousness. The injustice of her transformation, the cruelty of her punishment, and her ultimate use as a tool for others reflect the darker themes of Greek mythology, where mortals often become pawns in the machinations of the gods. The Gorgon sisters too were shrouded in mystery and terror. Steno and Euryale mourned their sister's death, their anguish cries echoing across the seas and turning even the bravest of heroes away from their lair. While Medusa was mortal and her dream brought fame to Perseus, the immortal Gorgons were said to continue their existence, lurking in the shadows, embodying the raw, untamed chaos of the ancient world. To the Greeks, the Gorgons represented the duality of beauty and Keres, or Keres, I think Keres. Okay. The Keres were malevolent spirits of death and destruction, feared for the relentless pursuit of suffering and carnage. These dark entities were the daughters of Nyx, the primordial goddess of the night, who also gave birth to other personifications of doom such as Thanatos, also known as Death, and Eris, also known as Strife. Unlike the gentle guide of peaceful death embodied by Thanatos, the Keres were harbingers of violent, untimely demises, and their presence was an omen of bloodshed and despair. The Keres were typically depicted as shadowy, winged figures with ghastly appearances. Their eyes glowed red with hunger. Their talon-like fingers were stained with blood, and their long, flowing robes were torn and drenched in gore. They carried an aura of decay and dread, often described as exuding the stench of the battlefield. Some accounts even describe them as having sharp, fang-like teeth, which they used to tear apart the souls of the dying. Their cries were said to be shrill and deafening, echoing across the land like the screams of those they sought to claim. These spectral beings were particularly drawn to battlefields, where they hovered above the chaos, seeking the weak, the wounded, and the dying. They would swoop down like vultures, clawing at their victims and drinking their blood as their life force ebbed away. The Keres were relentless and merciless. No prayer or offering could appease them once they had chosen their victim. Warriors often feared the Keres more than their mortal enemies, knowing that to die under their gaze was to face an eternity of torment. The Keres were also known to incite violence and strife. They thrived in chaos and were said to influence the outcome of battles by pushing warriors toward greater acts of brutality. Their presence heightened the bloodlust of those engaged in combat, driving them to fight with reckless abandon. The more violent the deaths, the more the Keres feasted. It was believed that their insatiable hunger for suffering was part of the cosmic balance, a grim reminder of the inevitability of death and the chaos that lurked just beneath the surface of human civilization. Despite their fearsome nature, the Keres were not purely malevolent. They fulfilled a role in the natural order of life and death. To the Greeks, they represented the darker aspects of mortality, the suddenness and violence with which life could end. They were reminders of the fragility of human existence and the omnipresence of death, especially in times of war. In later interpretations, the Keres were sometimes compared to the folklore of Norse steeped in sorrow, rage, and the consequences of divine cruelty, making her one of the most complex and chilling figures in ancient folklore. She was once a beautiful mortal queen, or in some versions, a Libyan princess, whose beauty caught the attention of Zeus, the king of the gods. Their union, like so many of Zeus' dalliances, incurred the wrath of Hera, his vengeful wife. Hera's punishment for Lamia was cruel and unparalleled. Depending on the version of the myth, Hera cursed Lamia by stealing or killing her children, driving her into inconsolable grief. In some versions, Hera's vengeance was even more personal. She cursed Lamia with eternal wakefulness, robbing her of ability to close her eyes, so that the image of her dead children would torment her forever. This agony twisted Lamia's mind, driving her into madness and transforming her from a sorrowful mother into a vengeful, child-devouring monster. Over time, Lamia's once ethereal beauty gave way to a monstrous appearance. She was often described as part woman, part serpent, with a lower body that slithered like a snake. Her face retained traces of her former beauty, but was distorted by cruelty and suffering. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, dear to Hera's curse, glowed with a predatory light. In some versions of the myth, Lamia was given the ability to remove her eyes at will to gain brief respite from her torment. Driven by insatiable rage and despair, Lamia became a nocturnal predator. She roamed the land under the cover of darkness, luring unsuspecting travelers and preying on children. Her methods were both cunning and cruel. She would seduce men with her lingering beauty, only to reveal her monstrous form at the moment of their demise. ancient Greeks also believed that Lamia had a connection to sorcery. Some myths portrayed her as a powerful witch who could summon storms, cast curses, and manipulate reality. Her ability to shapeshift added to her mystique, allowing her to move undetected among her prey. A serpent-like lower body further linked her to chthonic deities and the mysterious primal forces of the underworld. These stories are very, very captivating and interesting to me. Okay, last story. The Empusa. The Empusa, one of the most chilling and enigmatic creatures of Greek mythology, was a fearsome demon associated with the night and the underworld, often described as a vampiric or shape-shifting entity. The Empusa preyed on unsuspecting mortals, feeding on their blood and flesh. As one of Hecate's servants, the goddess of witchcraft, ghosts, and crossroads, the Empusa carried out her mistress's will, stalking the darkness to terrorize and devour her victims. The Empusa's origins are tied to the demonic and supernatural realm of ancient Greek mythology. As a servant of Hecate, the Empusa acted as both a symbol of fear and a warning against wandering into the unknown, especially at night. The Empusa's appearance was horrifyingly unique and designed to instill terror. She was often described as a ghastly creature with one leg of brass or bronze and another leg of a donkey, emphasizing her unnatural and hybrid nature. Her body was a grotesque blend of beauty and monstrosity, with a seductive, alluring face that she used to enchant her victims, before revealing her true ghastly form. Her fiery red hair framed glowing eyes that burned with an unholy light, and her voice was said to be both hypnotic and chilling. In some versions, the Empusa could disguise herself completely as a beautiful woman to deceive her prey. She would lure young men, travelers, and wanderers with her beauty and charm, only to drain their life force or feast on their flesh once they were vulnerable. The Empusa was a shapeshifter capable of transforming her appearance at will. This ability made her one of the most dangerous entities in Greek mythology, as she could seamlessly blend into human society. Her preferred prey was solitary travelers, especially those who ventured into the wilderness at night. She would appear as a radiant, enchanting woman, offering comfort or companionship, only to strike when her victim was least expecting it. The Empusa's hunger was insatiable. She fed on the blood and flesh of her victims, leaving behind empty, lifeless husks. Her attacks were swift and brutal, and her victims rarely had time to comprehend what was happening before they were drained of life. Despite her predatory nature, the Empusa was also cunning and playful in her malevolence. According to some accounts,